the federal government didn't have a lot of money, but it certainly had an incentive to subsidize the railroad construction. They wanted to get people west to legitimate those claims. They wanted to have a transportation system that would help them in terms of military needs. They wanted to have a cheap transportation system for goods and services and for people. All of those things we listed were positive externalities that came from constructing the railroad system. And the federal government wanted to subsidize those things, particularly when the Southerners were out of Congress, but didn't have dollars, didn't have cash to do it with. But what they had was a huge amount of land. And so what the government did was they gave grants of land to the railroad construction companies. This map, the shading is really hard to see. I don't even know. Let me turn out the light and see if it shows any better. This map is showing, does that show a little better? The light gray in the state is showing the maximum amount of federal land that could have been granted to the railroads for the construction. Yeah, check Iowa too. This map shows you the grants that were actually made. So the lands that were actually granted to the railroads. So first off, there's a whole bunch of lines going east-west here through Iowa, corn country. There's a whole lot of lines going east-west here through Minnesota, more corn, northern wheat. Look at this big, thick swath of land here and here. Here we are down here. Here's the Amtrak ride up to Seattle. That's pretty cool. Here's the Amtrak ride back to Chicago. It's okay. This part's pretty. Oh, you want to get out here, same thing for 36 hours. Those are the land grants that the railroads actually received. 12% of the land mass in the United States was given to the railroads to subsidize construction. Why did they skip Texas?
Just like no land. A lot of them. They do something like that.
Thank you, Richard. The federal government didn't own any land in Texas. Because, yeah, Lone Star. Okay, there you go. Yeah. And South Dakota at this point was Indian reservation. So, okay, 12%. Thank you, Richard. 12% of the land mass in the United States was given to the railroads through these land grants. When they would do the land grants, some of it came federal government, 131 million acres from the feds, 49 million acres from the state governments, and it would be in a checkerboard fashion. So the railroad track goes here in the middle of my little picture, and every other section, so remember these are 1 square mile by 1 square mile, 640 acres, alternative sections would be given to the railroad. So the federal government would keep, for instance, the shaded in squares, and the railroad would get the non-shaded squares. The idea was that the railroad, once they had constructed the railroad, that should increase the value of the land. And so then the railroad would be able to sell the land and benefit from that by having the revenues from the land sales. The federal government kept alternative sections because they figured they would sell the land, they would sell their sections of the land, and that they would benefit as well. You had advertisements like this one. Here's the Illinois Central Railroad that's selling 1 million acres of superior farming lands in 40, 80, and 160-acre quarter sections, quarter half sections, and quarter sections from $8 to $12 per acre, and a whole bunch of information about the land and the terms of payment and so on. Whoops, make sure it doesn't go falling all the way down. And the railroads, this was the way in which the railroads were subsidized. This generated an enormous amount of wealth. When they built the Central Pacific, which comes from San Francisco, and eventually met up with the Union Pacific at Promontory Point, Utah in 1869. Stanford, you may have heard of him. Crocker, used to be a bank called Crocker Bank that got absorbed into something else, absorbed into something else, absorbed into something else, and now everything is either Wells Fargo or Bank of America. Hopkins, as in the Mark Hopkins Hotel, and Huntington, as in the Huntington Library. So these are names of very rich and famous people here in California. These men became incredibly wealthy through this construction of the railroad and through the land grant system and the other subsidization of loans that they got for building the railroads. One of the things that these guys argued was that I love this part. How many people have been up to Tahoe? Been taken 80 up to Tahoe? Okay, they argued that the Sierra Mountains started 6 miles east of Sacramento. You're not even at Roseville. All right? You're not even out of suburbia at 6 miles east of Sacramento. But they argued, because the people on the East Coast in the Congress, they've never been out here. They didn't know where the mountains began, so they showed them these pictures of the mountains, and they said, look, it starts right here, just east of Sacramento. And that's much more difficult to build the railroad through the mountains, and so they got more land and more money for the miles of track that went through the mountains, which started 6 miles east of, There was a heavy reliance on Chinese laborers for the construction of the Central Pacific Railroad. This is something that Professor Such will touch on next week when he's here on Thursday. By 1906, whereas we had begun with lots of different railroads all around the country, these local and regional railroads, by 1906 there's been all sorts of conglomerations, and so 7 groups controlled 85% of the railroad earnings in the United States. So it becomes a very concentrated industry by the turn of the century. And I have now, once again, gone through all of my notes without looking at them. This is why I wind up forgetting things, because I go through all my notes without looking at them. Yeah, that's close. Okay. When we were back east last year, you can see some of these, like the Vanderbilt family was one of the families that made a lot of money off of railroads on the East Coast, and they have, you go on tours of these houses, these huge houses that all this railroad money built, and it was like, just their summer mansion. It's just mind-boggling. I've been doing this to my son since he was little. So, we go to Hearst Castle. At Hearst Castle, it's a fabulous tour, right? You go to Hearst Castle, and I'm there telling my 7-year-old about distribution of wealth and Gini coefficients and all that good stuff. It's like, Mom, can I just swim in the pool? No, honey, we can't swim in the pool. Okay. I don't know. The downside of having an economic historian for a mother. All right. Concentration of wealth means we wind up with a very small number of railroads. And most importantly, we wind up particularly in local areas with one railroad line. So there's not going to be 2 different railroad lines that take you from Albany to Oakland. There's going to be one railroad line that goes from Albany to Oakland because the cost of constructing these railroads is just too great. And that means that we need to think about pricing and monopoly issues. So if we draw the picture that shows profit maximization for the monopolist, put dollars on the vertical, quantity on the horizontal, the difference between the monopolist and in the perfect competition, lots and lots of different companies, all producing the same product, a homogeneous product. And so every individual producer faces a really tiny part of the total demand curve. For a monopolist, there's no close substitutes for what the monopolist is producing, so the monopolist faces the entire demand curve, and therefore the downward sloping demand curve is different than the marginal revenue curve. So in monopoly, remember, you've got a marginal revenue curve that has twice the slope of the demand curve and cuts the distance between the vertical axis and your demand curve in half. So it's twice as steep, and cuts that distance in half. And then you can start with just your standard marginal cost curve, so a standard upward sloping marginal cost curve. You can put the little Nike swoosh there, or you can just have it everywhere upward marginal cost curve. Profit maximizing companies always produce where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Drop it down, that gives you the profit maximizing price. We'll call it QM. It's the monopoly's quantity. Dash it up until you hit the demand curve, and then dash that over. Call that P sub M. That's the monopolist price. So in monopoly, the firms that are monopolists are going to produce a smaller quantity at a higher price than would the same industry if it was split up into a perfectly competitive industry. All right, that's our standard picture. Now for railroads, we need to make a little tweak on this picture, because for railroads, there's an enormously high fixed cost. The costs of construction are extraordinarily high. Laying down all that rail, not a cheap thing to do. And so because there's very high fixed costs, the picture that we really want is the one that we call natural monopoly. With a natural monopoly, in this case, it's a natural monopoly due to very high fixed costs. And with very high fixed costs, that means that the average costs are declining over the relevant range of production. So here we go again, dollars on the vertical, quantity on the horizontal. I want you to draw an average cost curve that never hits a minimum. So it's going to come swoop down, and it's going to get flatter and flatter, but I don't want it to hit a minimum until it's off your notepad and onto the person's desk next to you. That's the average cost curve. If average costs are falling, what does that tell you about marginal costs? If average costs are falling, marginal costs are above or below. If your GPA is going down, did you do better this semester or worse? Worse. So if your average is falling, it means your marginal is below your average. Always go back to something you know. All right. We can draw it with a downward sloping marginal cost curve just so long as it's below. Most books draw it with a horizontal. It doesn't really matter. We're going to get so many lines going here. I'm just going to go ahead and draw a horizontal marginal cost curve. The marginal cost curve is going to cross the average cost curve at the what point on the average cost curve? Minimum. That's right. So the marginal cost curve will cross the average cost curve when we hit the minimum, and then it'll start to go back up. All right. Now put on here a demand curve. Oh, I had to draw this like 3 times in my office to make sure that I don't go nuts on it. I want your demand curve to come down, and I want it to eventually cross both of those lines that you've got. So bring your demand curve down like this, and make sure it crosses both your average cost curve and your marginal cost curve. You can draw a straight line demand curve, but just make sure that it comes down and crosses both the AC and the MC. And then again, we need a marginal revenue curve. The marginal revenue curve is going to be twice as steep. It's going to split the distance between the vertical axis and the demand curve. I've got more colors than you do, so I'm going to go yet another color. So there's my marginal revenue curve. All right. Now, whoops. No, sorry, my bad. There it is. Still there. Don't worry. We're good. All right. Whoa. 10. Hey, I don't want that one. Different color. There. A. Okay. Point A. First thing let's find is profit max. Businesses maximize profit when they produce the quantity where what equals what? MR equals MC. Always true. Drops out of the calculus. Has nothing to do with anything else. It just drops out of the calculus. So it's always true that profit maximization is the quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Find that point. So find the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Dash it down. Call it Q sub A. And if this is a profit maximizing monopolist that has to charge the same price to everybody, so it's a single price monopolist, then you go up to the demand curve to find the price. So go up from QA until you hit your demand curve. Which one was that? The blue one. Until you find your demand curve, dash that over, call that P sub A. That's your initial price. That's the price that the profit maximizing monopolist would charge. With natural monopoly, there are a lot of people who get upset with monopolists that charge the profit maximizing price and produce the profit maximizing quantity, because in this case, is the monopolist making profit? Yes or no? You betcha, because at that Q sub A is the price is above the average cost. And so the monopolist is making abnormal economic profit equal to the area bounded on the top by P sub A and on the bottom by, I don't know, I went up from Q sub A until I hit A sub AC, so I'll call it AC sub A. That's the profit the company's earning. That's a lot of abnormal profit. So there's sometimes pressure put on the government to regulate a natural monopoly and have the natural monopoly produce a quantity where we're going to call it B, where there is a fair return, a fair level of profit. I'll put fair in quotes. A fair or normal return. What's a normal amount of economic profit? 0. So if we want normal economic profit, that means we're looking for the point where the demand curve crosses the average cost curve. So find the point where your demand curve crosses your average cost curve. We're going to label that B. Oh, I forgot to label the first one A. Label that point B, and that would be where there was a normal or fair return, which means profit equals 0. In that case, the company would produce a quantity Q sub B and price it at the price P sub B. A third possibility would be to have the socially optimal quantity. Sometimes we call this Pareto optimal. You may, if people done 100A, may have seen this. Pareto optimal or socially optimal quantity is where what equals what? Anybody from? I didn't do this in Econ 1, so you might have seen it in 100A. Did you? Price equals marginal cost. Did they ever talk about that? Yeah. Okay. So the socially optimal quantity would be where your demand curve crosses your marginal cost curve. We're going to label that C, and that would be the socially optimal or Pareto optimal point. So in this case, we're not talking socially optimal because of externalities. We're talking socially optimal in terms of economic issues, Pareto issues. And this is where price equals marginal cost. However, if we force the company to produce at point D, is there going to be anybody who wants to be a monopolist in this industry? C, sorry, at point C? No, because at that point, the price is below their average cost. They're incurring losses, and so you're not going to get companies unless you subsidize them. So now we're back to having subsidies. All right, now this all assumes that you've got a single price monopolist. In the railroads were able to price discriminate. The railroads were able to charge different prices to different people. When you have a monopolist that's able to distinguish between customers who have different willingness to pay, that is different demand curves, and you're able to enforce those differences, then the monopolist can charge different prices. It's just one of the things that falls out of the analysis of monopoly. A monopoly can price discriminate, not discriminate in the sort of social sense or the history 7B sense, but discriminate in the economic sense, in the sense of charging different prices to different groups. So when we talk about the price discriminating monopolists, we're not saying that they're discriminating based on protected categories. We're saying they're charging different prices to different groups based on ability to identify these different groups and segment those markets and charge them different prices. In particular, with the railroads, there was what they call the long haul, short haul difference in prices. And this had to do with the extent of competition. So imagine this. We've got Oakland here. We've got Stockton over here. That's way the heck out that way. What's in between? That's pretty close by. We've got Livermore. That's in between. Okay? Oftentimes, the rate that was charged to ship something from, say, Oakland to Livermore would be more than the rate that was charged to ship from Oakland to Stockton. So that's called short haul, long haul discrimination. The short haul was the Oakland to Livermore distance. The long haul would be the longer distance, the Oakland to Stockton distance. And that there would be a lower price that would be charged for hauling over the long haul than over the short haul. The reason typically was because of competition. That there might be one line and only one line that goes between Oakland and Livermore. But there might be more than one line that allows you to get from Oakland to Stockton. Think about airlines today, right? If you want to take an airline, I'm supposed to go to something in Santa Barbara in a couple of 3 weeks. And there's like one airline that flies to Santa Barbara. So the fares I found were like $700 round trip to fly to Santa Barbara. Absurd, right? Which I think means I'm going to get booted off this committee. But I wrote and I said, all I can find is $700 round trip. But if you want to go San Francisco to LAX, everybody and their sister flies San Francisco to LAX, right? So there's a lot of competition on the SFO LAX route. That's a longer distance, but you can get a much cheaper flight from San Francisco to LAX than you can San Francisco to Santa Barbara. Competition. So they had a short haul, long haul discrimination. This really ticks off, in particular, ticks off the farmers. Now we're back to agriculture. Remember, the railroads, part of the reason they construct the railroads is to help the farmers get their crops to market. Sam. The question is there greater demand for the shorter distances? There's more price inelastic demand for the shorter distances. Because the shorter distances, here's my picture, the shorter distances often are going to particular grain elevators. And so if you're pulling in your crop and you want to get your crop to market, you got to take your crop and put it into they're going to put it into one of these elevators. So that railroad companies tended to own the grain elevators. If you've never seen grain elevators, go back and drive up and down I-5. Or actually, you can just take 880 as if you're going to go to the Coliseum. Get off at the 23rd Avenue exit on your way to Alameda. If you're going to go to South Shore shopping in Alameda, get off 23rd, you're going to see the ConAgra plant there. There's a whole bunch of elevators right there for ConAgra. So these elevators, that's where they put the grain, and then they take it out of there and they put it in the railroad cars, and then the railroad cars take it to market. But the monopolies, the local monopolies that the railroads had, were really upsetting the farmers because they were affecting the farmers and the amount of profit the farmers could get. The farmers ultimately saw decreases in freight costs. So if I draw a trend line, this is 1870 to 1910, I've got a downward sloping trend line. These pictures are from your textbook. In the freight cost relative to the farm price here for Iowa, not as strong of a downward trend for Wisconsin. But there's a lot of fluctuation from year to year. And if we say, look, I'm a farmer and I'm living right here in, say, 1887. I hate this because I put my hand over it. You can't see what I've just done. Ooh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to highlight with white. Does that work? No. Phooey. Too bad. Okay. Oh, well. You get the idea. Don't look to the right of the line. So if you're a farmer who's living in 1887, you don't know what's going to come in the future. Same as that terms of trade picture I showed you at the beginning. You don't know that 1890 things are going to turn around and get better by 1910. You only know what you've lived through. And what you've lived through is that the prices of your railroad are pretty high in 1887, particularly relative to what they were earlier. There hasn't been any discernible downward trend as far as you're concerned as a farmer there in 1887. We get a whole lot of unhappy farmers for a long series of reasons, which I'm going to run through really fast because I've got 1 minute left in the ladies' whoops, there we were. My emphasis is about to open the door. The grain elevators are owned by the railroads, so there's monopoly power because they're owning both the railroads and the grain elevators. The farm prices are falling, their terms of trade are worsening. The new farmers didn't have as great area-specific human capital. They knew how to plant and farm in Pennsylvania or in Germany, but not necessarily where they were. The railroad rates were high, they were inconsistent, they were exercising monopoly power. In the South, we've got the issue with the crop liens and the stuff we talked about earlier about debt peonage. We've got a fear of foreclosure on the part of the farmers that had purchased their land, not the ones that were homesteading, which leads to a push for regulation of the railroads. And so we get regulations coming in the 1870s and the 1880s. So a U.S. Supreme Court case in 1877 that sets the legal groundwork for regulation. 1886, the federal government can regulate the interstate commerce. They established the Interstate Commerce Commission. In 1906, the court decides they can set maximum railroad rates. And all of this is in response to the exercise of this power by the monopolies that had formed these big companies subsidized by these land grants. And I'll talk about industrialization on Thursday. Y'all have a great day. See you then.